Have you ever made a decision thinking it was your own, only to realize later you were pushed, nudged, or guilted into it? What if I told you that many of us are being silently controlled every day, not by force, but by psychology? Ladies and gentlemen, today, I invite you to look deeper into something we often ignore, yet encounter almost every single day: manipulation. Not the obvious kind where someone yells or threatens, but the quiet kind where words, emotions, and even silence become tools of control. You see, manipulation isn't always loud. Sometimes it's hidden in a soft tone, a sigh, a guilt-laced, "I guess you don't care." It's the art of making you believe that your choices are your own, when in reality, they've been carefully crafted by someone else. Let's start by understanding what manipulation really is. At its core, manipulation is about control, but it hides behind influence, and that's where the confusion begins. Influence is natural. We all influence each other. Parents influence children. Teachers influence students. Leaders influence teams. But manipulation crosses a line. It's when someone uses psychological tactics to twist your thoughts, emotions, or decisions without your full awareness and often against your best interests. Imagine someone constantly pointing out your flaws, but in a way that makes you crave their approval. Or someone who plays a victim so well, you begin to doubt your own reality. This is an influence. This is psychological warfare, packaged in love, fear, or charm. And why do people manipulate? The answer lies deep in psychology. Some manipulate because they crave control. It makes them feel powerful in a world where they often feel helpless. Others do it out of insecurity, fearing rejection so deeply that they control others before being left. And some have simply learned that manipulation works, so they keep using it without guilt, without pause. The brain is vulnerable to manipulation, especially when it comes to emotions. Our emotional brain, the amygdala, responds faster than our rational brain. That means when someone triggers fear, guilt, or love, we often react before we think. Manipulators know this. They use emotion as a weapon. They bypass logic and target your heart, making you question yourself before you ever question them. But it's not just individuals who manipulate. Think about advertising, politics, even certain cultural norms. They use psychological tools to shape what we buy, believe, and value. Manipulation isn't always personal. Sometimes it's systemic. And the most dangerous part? Most people don't even know it's happening. Let me give you a simple example. You receive a message saying, "Only someone heartless would say no to this." Suddenly, the pressure is emotional, not logical. You feel trapped. If you say no, you're cold. If you say yes, you're not really choosing freely. That's manipulation in action, pushing emotional buttons, so you feel like you have no other option. And yet, we often miss these signs. Why? Because manipulation is subtle. It doesn't always scream. It whispers. It wears a mask of care, concern, or charm. And by the time we realize we're being controlled, the damage is often already done. So what's the takeaway? The first step is awareness. Understanding that manipulation is not always obvious. That control doesn't always come in the form of threats. It can come in the form of silence, guilt, even love. It can come from people close to us or from systems we trust. As we go deeper into this conversation today, I want you to keep one thing in mind. True power lies not in controlling others, but in understanding how others try to control us. Because only when we recognize manipulation can we rise above it. When we talk about manipulation, most people imagine obvious acts. Someone lying, pressuring, or blackmailing another into submission. But true psychological manipulation is far more dangerous because it often looks like care, feels like love, and sounds like reason. The techniques used are not random. They're carefully crafted, refined through trial and error, and rooted in deep psychological understanding of how the human brain and heart work. One of the most common tactics is gaslighting, a powerful method that involves making someone doubt their own reality. It starts with subtle comments like, "You're just too sensitive," or "That never happened." Over time, the victim begins to second-guess their memory, their perception, even their sanity. The manipulator wins by creating confusion, because confused mind is easier to control. And when someone begins to rely on the manipulator to confirm what's real, the grip becomes stronger than any rope. Then comes emotional blackmail, a weapon often disguised as love or dependency. It's the silent threat behind a phrase like, "If you really love me, you do this." It's the fear that saying no might make someone leave, get angry, or hurt themselves. Emotional blackmail is powerful because it targets your guilt. It doesn't force you physically. It manipulates you emotionally. The victim isn't dragged. They walk willingly, but with a heavy heart. Guilt tripping is another subtle but effective tactic. It's when someone constantly reminds you what they've done for you, or paints themselves as the victim to make you feel like the villain. The goal isn't justice or fairness. It's compliance. You might hear things like, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me?" Suddenly, you feel obligated, even when your heart says otherwise. Some manipulators prefer love bombing, especially in romantic or workplace settings. This tactic involves overwhelming you with affection, praise, gifts, or attention, so much so that your defenses come down. You feel seen, adored, chosen. But once you're emotionally hooked, the dynamic shifts. The love turns cold. You're left chasing the warmth you once received, believing you must have done something wrong to lose it. It becomes a cycle of highs and lows, engineered to keep you dependent and off balance. There's also triangulation, a tactic where the manipulator involves a third person to create competition, jealousy, or insecurity. They might say, "Even Sarah understands me better than you," or "Everyone else thinks I'm right." By doing this, they not only avoid accountability, but also make you feel isolated and insecure. You begin to compete for their approval, their time, their validation, and that's exactly where they want you. What's terrifying is how all these tactics exploit the basic human needs for connection, love, approval, and safety. Manipulators study your weaknesses, consciously or unconsciously. If you fear abandonment, they threaten to leave. If you seek validation, they give it and take it away. If you value peace, they create conflict and force you to become the fixer. They don't use logic to win. They use emotion to trap. On a psychological level, these techniques hijack your limbic system, the emotional center of your brain. The amygdala, which handles fear and survival, gets triggered by threats of abandonment, guilt, shame, or punishment. Once that part of the brain is activated, your ability to think critically and logically, located in the prefrontal cortex, diminishes. You react instead of reflect. That's how manipulation becomes effective. It puts you in survival mode, not thinking mode. In relationships, romantic or otherwise, manipulators often create an illusion of safety and connection in the beginning. They study your desires, fears, and dreams, then mirror them. They become who you want them to be. But this is a trap. Once trust is established, they begin to shift. Subtly, slowly, but strategically. Boundaries are tested. Emotional patterns are formed. And by the time you realize it, your self-esteem has eroded, and you're trapped in a cycle of trying to please someone who is never truly satisfied. Even in the workplace, manipulation appears in the form of passive-aggressive behavior, silent treatment, sabotage disguised as concern, or weaponized praise. You may find yourself questioning your worth, fearing being seen as difficult, or overworking just to maintain peace. All of this plays into the manipulator's hands, because the more unstable you feel, the easier you are to steer. And let's not forget systemic manipulation, media and advertising that trigger fear, scarcity, and insecurity to push us into buying, believing, or behaving a certain way. A product becomes a promise of self-worth. A headline becomes a tool of division. And once again, our emotions are used to bypass our rational thinking. Manipulation thrives in silence. It grows where there's confusion, guilt, and fear. It survives because the victim often doesn't recognize the pattern until it's too late. And perhaps the scariest part? Many manipulators don't even see themselves as manipulators. Some believe they're protecting themselves. Others think they're just really persuasive. But the effect remains. One person's sense of control comes at the cost of another's mental freedom. Understanding these techniques is not about labeling others. It's about reclaiming awareness. Because once you see the strings, it becomes harder for anyone to pull them. The first step to protecting yourself from manipulation is recognition. because you can't fight what you can't see. And that's exactly how manipulation works. It hides in plain sight. But once the mask falls, the game begins to change. The most powerful weapon you have against psychological manipulation is self-awareness. When you start noticing how certain situations or people make you feel, drained, confused, guilty, or like you're always the one adjusting. Those emotions are your internal alarms. They are not overreactions. They are signals. If you constantly feel like you're walking on eggshells, questioning your own memory, or responsible for someone else's happiness or anger, that's not love, loyalty, or leadership. That's manipulation, and your body often knows before your mind catches up. Recognizing red flags isn't about being paranoid. It's about being emotionally literate. Start by noticing patterns. Is there someone in your life who always shifts the blame but never takes responsibility? Who plays the victim every time you try to assert yourself? Who floods you with attention when they want something but vanishes when you set a boundary? Those aren't personality quirks. They're behavioral strategies. The next step is understanding the power of boundaries. Boundaries are not walls to push people away. They are filters to protect your energy, time, and mental clarity. A manipulator will always resist boundaries. Why? Because your lack of boundaries is where their power lives. They rely on your people-pleasing nature, your fear of confrontation, your need to be seen as nice or understanding. But boundaries are not cruel. They are acts of self-respect. Setting boundaries starts with small actions. Saying no without explanation. Taking space when something feels off. Not engaging in arguments that go in circles. Choosing to respond, not react. These are not dramatic moves. They're survival skills. And the more you practice them, the more you rewire your brain to stop falling into emotional traps. Another key tool in protecting yourself is learning to regulate your emotions. Manipulation thrives in moments of emotional vulnerability. If someone can get you to feel intense guilt, fear, or shame, they can make you act against your own interests. But when you know how to sit with those emotions, name them, and not let them drive your choices, you begin to regain control. This doesn't mean shutting down your emotions. It means not being ruled by them. Deep breathing, journaling, grounding exercises, even pausing before responding to triggering situations. These are small habits that lead to big changes in how manipulators affect you. Because remember, the less reactive you are, the less control they have. Educating yourself is also critical. The more you understand psychological tactics, the more immune you become. Read books, watch content, talk to therapists, or engage in safe conversations with people who've been through it. The goal isn't to become cynical, it's to become conscious. You don't need to assume everyone is a manipulator. You just need to trust yourself enough to notice when something doesn't feel right and not ignore it. In some cases, the best protection is distance. Not every manipulative person can be fixed. Some are toxic by design. And the longer you stay, hoping they'll change, the more damage they do. Walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom, especially if they've shown repeated patterns of lying, gaslighting, blaming, or making you feel small. One of the hardest parts is detaching from the emotional hooks they've planted in you. Many victims of manipulation carry a deep inner conflict. Knowing something is wrong but still feeling loyal, guilty, or even in love with the person causing the harm. That's not stupidity. That's psychological conditioning. When someone controls your self-worth, your need for their approval becomes a cage. Escaping it takes time, patience, and compassion for yourself. Therapy can play a huge role here. A good therapist doesn't just help you heal. They help you rebuild your internal compass. Because one of the biggest casualties of long-term manipulation is your ability to trust your own judgment. A therapist can help you untangle what's real from what's been projected onto you. And perhaps the most important shield you can develop is self-trust. Manipulators thrive when you doubt yourself. So every time you choose your truth over their story, your power grows. Every time you say, "That doesn't sit right with me," and honor that feeling, you reinforce your boundaries. Self-trust doesn't mean you'll never be manipulated again, but it means you'll recover faster, fall less deeply, and protect your peace with more clarity. Healing from manipulation isn't linear. Some days you'll feel empowered. Other days, you'll question yourself again. But each time you recognize the pattern, take a step back, and choose differently, you're winning. You're breaking cycles that may have existed for years. And that kind of growth, that's not just protection. That's transformation. In the end, protecting yourself from manipulation isn't about being cold or closed off. It's about being awake. It's about no longer handing your emotions, your choices, or your worth to someone who plays games with them. It's about knowing that your mind, your heart, and your story belong to you. Manipulation isn't just something that happens in toxic relationships or dramatic movies. It's woven into everyday interactions, often so subtly that we don't even recognize it. But the cost is real. Your peace, your clarity, your sense of self. Through this journey, we've explored what manipulation really is, the difference between influence and control, the silent tactics manipulators use, and most importantly, how you can break free. The truth is, manipulation only works in shadows. The moment you bring awareness to it, the spell begins to break. When you understand the emotional weapons used against you, gaslighting, guilt tripping, love bombing, you begin to see the game for what it is. And when you learn to set boundaries, regulate your emotions, and trust your instincts, you stop being a target and start becoming your own protector. Remember, the power to reclaim your mental freedom doesn't lie in changing others. It lies in recognizing your worth, honoring your voice, and refusing to shrink for anyone who benefits from your silence. You are not too sensitive. You are not overreacting. You are waking up. And in that awakening, you take back control, not just from manipulators, but from every voice that ever told you to doubt yourself. This isn't just psychology. This is survival. This is healing. This is power.